He willingly chooses death for a chance at a future rebirth, but awakens in 2084, utterly alone, with a forgotten past and a new, immortal life. The story begins in 2015. Mark Jarvis seems to have it all: a fulfilling, well-paying job, a circle of loyal friends, and most importantly, the love of his life by his side. His existence appears truly blessed, his future bright and promising, until a single life-altering medical diagnosis. A doctor delivers the news: he has an advanced form of cancer, giving him at best a year to live. While chemotherapy and aggressive treatment could offer a small reprieve, there are no certainties. Facing the irreversible reality of his impending death, Mark accepts his fate and begins to prepare. He entrusts his business to his most capable colleagues, sells his home and gives away his possessions. He shares the heartbreaking truth with his mother and girlfriend, pleading with the woman he loves to find happiness, no matter what. As his final days approach, Mark finds himself lost in old childhood memories, realizing with sorrow that he never truly cherished those moments, always assuming more time would come. But now time is slipping away. One day, Mark drives to the city's edge, abandons his car, and vanishes into the distance. Naomi, his girlfriend, eventually finds him, bewildered and disoriented. He tells her he can't remember how he got there or what happened. They both assume this is a symptom of the disease worsening and that his final moments are near. A few weeks later, Mark, Naomi, and a handful of close friends gather for a farewell party. During the emotional evening, someone mentions Miracle Health, a controversial but fast-growing private corporation. The company uses cryostasis to preserve bodies, hoping to one day revive them when future medical science can offer a cure and a new lease on life. Intrigued, Mark seriously considers the experimental procedure. To qualify, however, he must die before the cancer spreads too widely. In a heart-wrenching choice, he decides to end his life prematurely to secure his chance at revival. Naomi is shattered. She had planned to be with him until the very end, and the thought of losing him a moment sooner is unbearable. Nevertheless, Mark follows through. He dies by choice, holding on to the hope of a future return. The year is 2084, 7 decades later. Miracle Health successfully resurrects Mark. Doctors and assistants surround him, monitoring his vitals to ensure he is stable. Weak and disoriented, Mark passes out. When he wakes up again, he sees his reflection for the very first time. He feels awful, overcome by a crushing weakness and a pounding headache. West, a lead physician, sits down for a conversation. He gently asks if Mark remembers anything from his previous life. Mark can only recall vague fragments from 2015, a collection of hazy memories that aren't as clear as the doctors had hoped. A little later, Mark is told he's the first person ever to be brought back to life. His body is an astonishingly complex biological system. Only about 20% of his original organs remain. The rest is a new body, composed of 65% cloned muscles and tissues, 10% bionic implants, and 5% advanced technical devices embedded to monitor his vital functions. One such device is on his abdomen with an external interface for a cable. Through this, scientists gather real-time data on Mark's health to provide immediate medical support whenever needed. After his revival, Mark presents unexpected challenges for the doctors. His body is incredibly frail. He can barely move or speak and requires constant round-the-clock care. He is under 24/7 medical supervision, taking a host of pills daily, including painkillers and other medications to keep him alive. Despite everything, Mark pushes forward. Soon after, he manages to take his first steps, though still unable to walk on his own. He is never alone. His personal assistant, Elizabeth, is always by his side, fully dedicated to helping him in every possible way. A few days later, West and Sarah begin working to enhance Mark's physical abilities. He practices fine motor skills and does basic exercises, though every movement is painful, a pain that will lessen over time. As his recovery progresses, Mark starts asking questions, especially curious about how humanity has evolved over 70 years. He had imagined a future of flying cars, space exploration, and planetary colonies. But that, it turns out, was little more than science fiction. Humanity, it seems, has not changed all that much, only in small ways. One of the most significant shifts is in how people view love and relationships. Most no longer seek lifelong partners or traditional families. Instead, they value independence, open relationships, and personal freedom. Soon, Mark is introduced to a device called the Nanoscribe futuristic headset, which lets users view and save their memories like digital files on a flash drive. His first time using the Nanoscribe is overwhelming. A brutal headache hits him as a flood of memories rushes into his mind like an avalanche. Determined not to lose his past, he begins using the Nanoscribe regularly, learning to control it and his memories. Through it, he sees glimpses of his childhood, old friends, past lovers, and family, mentally returning to the moments when he was genuinely happy. The next morning, Elizabeth is caring for Mark and answering his many questions. Though she appears young, she reveals she is actually 46. She has no family or children, having embraced modern views on relationships. Elizabeth is open to being intimate with Mark, willing to do whatever it takes to keep him from feeling lonely. But first, he needs to get stronger physically. That night, Mark can't fall asleep. Restless, he gets out of bed to take a short walk. Using a support device to move, he finds himself in front of a mirror. Instead of a youthful body, he sees a horrifyingly old man staring back at him. He knows it's only in his head. After all, he's technically over 100 years old. Startled, he collapses to the floor, unable to get back up on his own. As his body sends out a critical alert, he crawls to the connection port and plugs in, hoping to alleviate the pain and transmit emergency data to the monitoring team. With each passing moment, Mark sinks deeper into his memories, overwhelmed by how his life has changed so completely. It all feels like a different reality, the images in his mind like mere illusions, yet it's a world he desperately longs to return to. He recalls the first girl who cared for him, his initial attempts at starting a business, and the loved ones who supported him through it all. The medical team soon holds an emergency meeting. An area of Mark's brain is beginning to fail under the strain. For reasons they can't yet grasp, his brain is malfunctioning, putting him at risk of losing all his memories. Mark begs everyone to leave the room so he can speak with West privately. In a quiet, heartfelt moment, the doctor admits that Mark may never be able to live a normal life. His body is simply too frail to function on its own. On top of that, the public is growing increasingly hostile toward the corporation behind his resurrection. People are uneasy with the idea of bringing the dead back or cloning human tissue. Protests against miracle health are becoming more frequent. Mark is devastated. This means he'll have to remain in the clinic, constantly monitored, with no real hope of building a life for himself. Time passes and the doctors gather to celebrate a milestone. It's been 100 days since Mark was given his second chance. No one is more excited than Elizabeth, who has by now become more than just his assistant. She's his lover. To mark the occasion, West returns a box of Mark's personal belongings. Inside, he finds his old journal, dried flowers from girls who once cared for him, a ball he played with as a kid, and photos of his early inventions. Among the items is something he doesn't recognize: a letter from Naomi, the woman he loved before he died. As Mark reads the letter, memories of Naomi come flooding back. Their love feels like it belonged to another lifetime, yet it was timeless, beyond rules and reason. They first met as teenagers in college and faced countless obstacles to be together. Naomi was in a relationship with someone else, which meant Mark had to endure her constant disappearances and secret meetings. Sometimes they saw each other rarely, sometimes not for years. When Naomi grew tired of their complicated situation, she would drift, sometimes sleeping with strangers. But no matter what happened, their love always found a way to survive. Just when it seemed they might finally have a chance at happiness, Mark was hit with the devastating news that he was sick and only had a year to live. Right now, Mark is overwhelmed by memories, but he still wants to read Naomi's letter from the year 2033. In it, she reveals that at 50 years old, she finally realized she had only loved him her entire life. After losing her friends, family, and the partner she'd been with for years, Naomi decided to undergo a similar experiment. She froze herself in a cryo chamber, hoping to be revived 50 years later so she could be with Mark. When Mark learns this, he turns to West, asking about Naomi and how soon she might be brought back. West explains that human resurrection is an incredibly complex, time-consuming, and, most importantly, extremely expensive process. Investors funded Mark's revival because they were interested in his specific case, but successful resurrections are only possible for people who are strong and relatively healthy. Mark died just in time, before his illness had severely damaged his internal organs. Naomi, on the other hand, lived until 50 and developed chronic illnesses, making her revival not only dangerous, but very unlikely to succeed. Realizing the woman he loves will probably never come back, Mark falls into a deep depression. He spends hours looking at old photos, remembering the time they shared. He recalls a fight they had when she found out about his illness and his decision to join a private cryo experiment. Naomi was furious. She didn't want him giving up on life early or risking everything in a corporate trial. That fight drove her to pack her things and leave, saying she was going back to her ex. The memory still hurts. Trying to let go of his old life, Mark asks Elizabeth to shave his head. Some time passes and Mark starts asking questions again. He hasn't fully given up hope that Naomi could be revived. He just wants to understand why the doctors don't share his optimism. He suspects they've conducted similar experiments in the past, which might be why they're so quick to dismiss the idea. But Elizabeth doesn't know anything. She's new at the clinic and signed a non-disclosure agreement, so she can't be fully honest with him. Days, weeks, and months pass. The doctors begin to notice that Mark's condition is deteriorating. Instead of improving, he's declining. His depression is taking a toll on both his body and mind. He looks vacant, wandering through the facility with no purpose. Worst of all, his memories are beginning to fade due to neurological issues, and there's nothing the doctors can do to stop it. Elizabeth suspects West and his assistant no more than they're saying and begs them to help Mark, but they just shrug, helpless. That evening, Elizabeth, now in love with Mark, tries to comfort him. She gives him a sedative and dims the lights so they can be intimate. Technically, he's not yet cleared for physical exertion, but she doesn't care. She hopes being close to her might distract him from Naomi, but quickly realizes she's wrong. Even in this moment, Mark is still comparing her to the woman he lost, unable to let go of the past. Later that night, Mark sneaks into West's office and steals memory cards containing his stored recollections. When he watches them, he uncovers a horrifying truth the private company has been hiding. The scientists had tried to resurrect hundreds of people, and every attempt had ended in failure. Not a single patient survived. Those who were brought back briefly experienced nothing but terror, pain, and suffering before dying again. Later, West gathers investors and patrons to present the clinic's accomplishments. He promises a great future for medicine through their Project Lazarus, claiming that Mark's successful revival is just the first step towards something monumental. West urges them not to spare any expense for further research and development, but he must prove the project's effectiveness. He presents Mark to the public, causing shock and applause. Afterward, West makes a stunning announcement. He wants to launch a new project, one that would not only give life back but also love. He promises to resurrect Naomi soon, but Mark realizes this is nothing more than a populist lie to raise more money. The attempt to revive a sick 50-year-old woman is destined to fail. A short while later, West visits Mark to discuss what's happening and what Mark has seen. He knows Mark watched the recordings but insists that he suffers with every failure and lost life. Mark doesn't believe the fanatic's words, convinced that for West this is just business, with no room for human emotions or feelings. The misunderstanding between doctor and patient deepens, as they have completely different views on life. However, Mark is forced to admit that he can't survive without this project and the private corporation, which leads him to accept his fate. Continuing to use the memory recorder, Mark is transported back to the day he threw a farewell party for his family and friends. The most moving moment for him was when Naomi came to reconcile. She accepted his decision and promised to stay by his side until his last breath. During the party, Mark gave most of his belongings to friends and loved ones, leaving only Naomi and her love for him. Now, Mark understands that life is just a form of material existence. Without emotions, feelings, and experiences, life has no meaning. It's empty. People and the connections with them give life purpose, and feelings and cherished memories are more valuable than life itself. Fully immersed in the past, Mark goes to the cryo chamber where Naomi's body is stored. Elizabeth finds him there and confesses her love for him. He can't return her feelings, still loving Naomi and wishing to be with her, but he knows that's impossible. Mark admits that the last months of his previous life were the happiest he'd ever had, surrounded by family and friends, living life to the fullest and experiencing a full range of emotions. Now this isn't life, but a miserable existence without feelings, plans, or exciting events. Realizing he doesn't want to continue living such a dreadful life, Mark asks for a drug to end his suffering. Elizabeth is shocked, torn between loving him and understanding how deeply he's struggling. A few days later, Mark uses the memory recorder to preserve all his memories. After recording most of his past onto a hard drive, he meets Elizabeth and learns the name of the drug used to end life. He finds the very drug in the medicine cabinet and remembers what happened just before his first death. Naomi had been with him every minute, buying the medical drug that allowed him to end his life. She stayed by his side, waiting for his death, and then notified the clinic so they could save and freeze his body. Realizing that he had lived a happy life that doesn't need to be continued, Mark drinks the poison and goes to Naomi's cryo chamber. He deliberately opens it so that they both will be doomed to die together and says goodbye to his beloved. It seems like the end, but the doctors have opposing plans. They use the saved data and Mark's body to resurrect him once again, against his will, because he is the result of an experiment with no right to choose or voice. At the same time, it becomes clear that even the previous version of Mark was just another copy, as West has resurrected him dozens, if not hundreds, of times. If you enjoyed the recap, please leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.